what I'm going to talk about is a situation I was in, that we were in our company, where none of our applications could start new pods. If you've used Kubernetes, you might understand why this might be a problem, that you can't start new pods. It started last October. It was a morning of a normal working day, no special events or anything upcoming. I woke up too early. I usually wake up quite early because I'm an old man. Old people wake up early. And I took a glance at our channel, which has the sort of global alerts, especially for our team, the ops team, which was a mistake. Because it looked like this. It's a small text, but there was dozens, if hundreds, of messages saying that kube pods are crash looping. I made some offhand remark on the channel. There was no one there, so I could use the language I wanted, at the time at least. But I had no idea what was going on and what was the impact. Maybe it was our monitoring system or alerting system that was malfunctioning or something. But at around the same time, a developer from the streaming platform, reported that there was increased latencies and error rates in our service. So we declared an incident and started our incident response process. And we'll come back to that later. So who is this we? I mentioned I work in the ops team, the operations team at Yleisradio, Yle, which is the Finnish National Broadcasting Company, like almost every country has. We operate and produce a couple of TV and radio channels, and as things become more digital, we also have digital services like yle.fi, which is the news website, and the arena.yle.fi, which is the streaming platform that has, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of videos, and we also stream live the content in the TV channels and radio channels. We have roughly 2 million daily users or so. You could say that our service isn't safety critical in that if our service goes down, the digital service, doesn't mean people die or get injured or anything like that. So it isn't safety critical. But the fact is that these web app systems like the yle.fi and Arena, they have become already business critical for Yleisradio also, and the tendency is for these business critical systems to become safety critical in some way or another. Let's say there was some sort of national emergency, which you could imagine in the present scenarios in the world. You could see that our role would be central, and we might even be somewhat safety critical in this sense. So we really do try to keep our systems up and running. So you could ask, why do accidents even happen? Why make accidents happen? Why don't you just avoid them altogether? Would be easier. For this, I will turn to the model developed by a Danish researcher, Jens Rasmussen, who was a researcher in the safety critical domains. And I borrowed this from the presentation by Richard Cook at the Velocity conference in 2013. And it basically looks like this. It has 3 boundaries, which are intentionally drawn a little vague, because they are not real boundaries, they're imaginary boundaries. There's the economic failure boundary, which means that if you go beyond that boundary, you don't have money to run your business. So you have to be inside that boundary. If the lights are on, you are inside the boundary. Then you have the unacceptable workload boundary, which is the place where people fall asleep or get exhausted and so on. Maybe more relevant in the world where you work physically. And then there's the acceptable performance boundary, which is the boundary. If you go over that boundary, then you start get accidents and incidents and so on. And you have some sort of operating point where you are in between these boundaries. And also the operating point all the time moves around, and even the boundaries move because the economic reality will change over time. And with apologies to Jens and Richard, I'll present a slightly modified version of this. I think the acceptable workload boundary is not so relevant for us, but what is relevant for us is this, what I call obsolescence boundary. And what I mean is that if we go beyond that boundary, we've stopped changing our system, stopped developing new features, and users don't care about us anymore. Or you maybe stop upgrading your servers and stop patching them and they get breached and so on. So what you get from this side is a pressure and push to change, to evolve. You might, if you wanted to stop all the changes, then maybe accidents wouldn't happen at all. What you get from the economic failure boundary is, of course, push for economic efficiency, which we do all the time. We have to get more out of our systems and optimize and get more economic efficiency all the time. So finally, we have the accident boundary. I mean, usually, because we don't want to cross that boundary, we don't want to get the accidents, we have some sort of error margin. So we don't want to be near the accident boundary, so we would get accidents all the time. So we make an error margin for ourselves to be a little safe. And these could be something like rules, regulations, safety margins, speed limits, redundancy, overcapacity, distribution, automation, and so on. So the question is, why doesn't this lead to safe operations? Why do we have accidents even though we have this margin? And the reason is that we don't know where the accident boundary actually is. All we know is the margin that we have set for ourselves. And the reason for this is that we have so few big accidents. The platforms we use nowadays are so robust, and we constantly trying to make everything safer and better, and we have few accidents, so therefore we don't know where the accident boundary is. So we only operate with the help of the margin that we have set for ourselves, and the operating point might be close to the margin, and we sometimes cross the margin and think, whoa, that was dangerous, maybe we should go back to the safe side. But if we do this enough times, this crossing of the margin that we have set, we start to think that, what's the big deal? Why, nothing bad happened when we crossed the margin. And what happens next is we decide to move the margin because we have been too conservative. We can utilize our resources more efficiently. But the fact is that the accident boundary hasn't moved. We have just moved the margin closer to the accident boundary. And what happens if we get too close, we get accidents. And now we know, there's the accident boundary. Now we know where we shouldn't have crossed the boundary. And once there is an accident, we all know we get the strong push back. So we get the operating point at the margin back to the safer side. People in the management say that we should use all our resources and all our money to get the system back up and never happen again. But the reality, once we've done this, moving the margin and the operating point, is that as time goes by, we forget the incident and we start to think that maybe we have been too conservative and we should maybe start utilizing more and start changing things again. So even accidents don't have the permanent effect on our operating point. So back to our story. We have declared an incident. So most pods of the cluster of the streaming platform Arena are crash looping. I'm sort of sad that I didn't get a screenshot of the K9S because it was all red. There were few pods there that were still running, most of them were crash looping. When we looked at other clusters that we have in different domains, it was evident that most pods in all clusters, and both in test and production, were crash looping at that point. This is what the dashboard of the streaming platform backend component looked like. There's the graph for the autoscaler, and it said that there was 3 pods ready, but it was determining that there should be 12 pods. So the backend components were using way more CPU than they originally requested. And when we looked at the logs of the crash looping pods, it looked like this. I've been in this field for over 25 years, and I usually can, I can usually understand what the problem is, but these were, I don't know, didn't understand. This was from JVM, and this was from some Node.js. It did say out of memory, but I didn't understand what this meant. The cloud provider, their status pages were all green. There was no global event happening or anything. So it was a little bit confusing at this point. One realization at this point was that the reason that we even had services up at this point at all was because of pod disruption budgets, which we had defined, I guess, for maybe all of the applications that we run. Pod disruption budget, it's a specification of how Kubernetes can move pods around when nodes are being deleted or created and so on. So the sort of voluntary movement of pods. So it specifies, as an example, you can specify the minimum available pods that should be ready all the time. And because the new ones were not starting because of this mysterious problem, it meant that the PDP kept these last remaining pods alive and did not try to move them because new ones weren't starting. It was also early in the morning, and we have a quite predictable traffic pattern. In the nighttime, there's not much activity, but in the morning, it starts getting more and more traffic all the time. And this was also a problem with the PDPs, because if we had 3 pods remaining, they would have to serve all the increasing traffic also, because we weren't getting new pods at that time. So in the peak hours, it might be, I don't know, 30 pods or 40 or 50 pods or something like that. And the question that came to my mind, at least at this point, because we didn't know what the reason was, that what if the remaining pods were deleted for some reason? For example, you can always have some sort of the underlying hardware might delete the actual virtual machine that were running the remaining pods. So in effect, all of our sites would go down, and we would have no idea how to get them back up, which was quite awful feeling to have at that point. And finally, we realized that the bad pods, so to speak, the ones that weren't starting, were running on different machine images than the ones that were still running. And at this point, to clarify, we use Karpenter as the cluster autoscaler, which is like for the right sizing of the nodes and also for automatic updates. And with the sort of modified Rasmussen model, you could think that this is like a push for economic efficiency and push for more frequent updates, more frequent changes. And you need to realize that it isn't bad to get to the margin, closer to the margin, if you don't cross the margin. So it's better to get more efficient as long as you stay out of the accident boundary, actually. So at this point, we forced the Karpenter to use the hard-coded machine ID that we identified as the sort of safe one, the healthy one. This is a nice feature of Kubernetes, of course. You can edit the actual resources online, so you can quickly determine if your fixes are actually doing anything. And sort of luckily, we have this same problem in the test clusters at this point, because it's nice to be able to test that your fix doesn't make things worse, because how would you otherwise know if you would just break things more? And then we, again, manually forced Karpenter to provision new machines with the new machine image and just use the kubectl cordon to say that you shouldn't schedule new pods to the buggy machine nodes. And 2 hours after the incident, the systems are finally becoming to be stable. It took, I think if it started at around 7 o'clock, I stayed on my computer from 7 to 11 to get all the things sorted with the help of other people also. And yes, in the end, it turns out the machine image there was a bug in the operating system or the software running on it. And yeah, the nodes weren't able to start JVM, Node, or Python processes, which is pretty much all of our applications are using those languages and runtimes. And since the Karpenter was configured as it typically is, it consolidated the cluster to the new buggy machine images without anyone doing anything. And the fact that the pods weren't able to start is not of Karpenter's or Kubernetes concern, because of the separation of concerns. Maybe in the future it might be possible, but from their perspective, it might have been the case that the developers made some bug and the bots didn't start. So they can't know what's the reason, what the actual reason is. So once you have this sort of near miss or close call, we only experienced increased latencies and error rates. You should hold a postmortem. What I recommend is that you do not fixate on finding one root cause. I guess this is the welcome to my TED Talk moment, because you've been doing postmortems wrong if you are fixating on finding one root cause. Of course, it's everyone's natural tendency to find the root cause. You want to know what the single thing was and the causal chain that caused all the problems. And often there's a pressure from the management. The message that they usually give is that this should never happen again, and you should fix whatever caused it, and please stop all the incidents in the future also at the same time. But I think the research has shown that fixating on one root cause is counterproductive. And part of the reason is that it's also a decision what you call root cause, because you decide when to stop looking further. If there's a bug in the system, you determine that this is the root cause, but maybe the bug was a result of some pressure or poor management or whatever. So even if you use the root cause, it's always subjective. To illustrate this, I will give a short example by the same Richard Cook in a lecture about the Trident Air Ontario plane crash in 1989, which caused 24 people to die. A little bit more dramatic. The initial investigation showed that there was ice on the wings of the plane, and I don't know anything about aeroplanes, but they say that you shouldn't do a takeoff if that's the case, because it might crash. And the fact is that it is the pilot's responsibility to ensure that there isn't ice on the wings before takeoff. So it's the pilot who should make sure that this doesn't happen. So the initial investigation concluded that it's pilot error, end of story. But by coincidence, there was a commission that was assigned to study the accident. The study took 2.5 years and produced 4 volumes of text, 4 lengthy volumes of text, and it identified at least 25 contributing factors. The pilot error, of course, was the trigger, but there was other things going on behind the scenes. They found, for example, poor training, poor management, lack of regulatory oversight, conflicting instructions, and so on. And without these contributing factors, there would have been no incident or accident. And if you have stopped at the pilot error as being the root cause of the accident, you would have never found these other things out, and probably would have more incidents or accidents would have happened. So in a way, in this modified Rasmussen model, there was a strong push to the closer to the margin and the acceptable performance boundary by the company and by the whole industry. And same is often true of incidents in our digital systems. So instead of finding a root cause, you identify contributing factors, and you realize or accept that the incident is sort of a perfect storm. It is triggered by some event or multiple events, and it requires these contributing factors to be present for it to happen at all. And when you do this, you can find multiple things to improve, and you can enhance whatever made the incident less bad, and you can enhance things that went right during the resolving the incident. So, for example, this is the list that I relate to our little near miss or close call. I won't read it all out, but there's things that all the contributing factors that that we had. There was some key things like the machine image was faulty, there was a bug. Their test suite didn't cover all the runtimes. They didn't think that it would be so important. I guess never something like this was never happened before, and we had the Karpenter configured to automatically consolidate. And if hypothetically some other things would have happened during the event, like if the efforts to fix would escalate even bigger problems, or the traffic would have increased faster, or the working pods would be deleted or stopped, or machines would go away, then we would have had a bigger incident. And then the question is, what's the root cause? Of course, you want to identify all the contributing factors and fix everything that you can. So we did hard code the machine even after the incident. And you can think of this with the model again, like slowing the pace of changes. And since it's already half year from the incident, we're already thinking that maybe we are too conservative. Maybe we should go back. I don't know. But this is how incidents go. You forget about them and try to improve. And
jump over the canyon of technical debt.
Yeah. So, in conclusion, incidents will never end. They will happen even if rarely. And this is because of these forces within our companies. We want to improve the efficiency, and we want to change things all the time, and with the, I guess, increasing pace in the modern world. They will continue to surprise you, and this is because our systems are typically pretty safe nowadays. We have the robust systems like Kubernetes and other CNCF software, and we constantly try to fix things and improve things. So what you can do is try to learn when they happened, the incidents, and especially learn what went right and why, and make that thing better. So that is all for me today, and I thank you.